A shy girl undergoes a gynecological surgery. Shockingly, her doctor is a young millionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The lights above were painfully bright, sterile white, humming quietly like a distant machine. The air inside St. Helena Women's Hospital carried that faint scent of antiseptic and something colder, something like fear. Grace Miller lay on the narrow surgical bed, her palms slick with sweat beneath the paper blanket. Her chest rose and fell too fast. She had always been shy, the kind of woman who apologized to strangers for taking up space. But this morning her heart beat so loudly she could almost hear it in her ears. The nurse adjusted her IV line. "You are going to do great, Grace," she whispered. Grace nodded, unable to speak. Her throat felt tight. She tried to focus on the soft beeping of the monitor instead of the thought that strangers would soon see and touch the part of her she was most ashamed of. It was just a surgery, a routine gynecological procedure. Yet to her it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. When the door opened, she thought she might faint. The man who walked in was not what she expected. Tall, clean-cut, with calm gray eyes that did not wander or judge. His name tag read, Dr. Adrian Hale. He looked too young to be the lead surgeon, barely in his 30s, confident but gentle. "Good morning, Miss Miller," he said softly. "We will take good care of you. You are safe here." His voice had a warmth that broke through her panic for a single second. Grace met his eyes, then quickly looked away. "Thank you, doctor," she managed to whisper. The anesthesiologist asked her to count backward from 10. 10, 9, 8. Her voice faded, her world dimmed, and just before she slipped under, she thought she heard him again, closer, quieter. "You are safe now, Grace." When she opened her eyes, everything was blurry. The ceiling swam above her in soft shapes. A monitor beeped beside her bed. Her throat burned from the breathing tube. For a long moment she could not tell if she was alive or still dreaming. Then the door creaked open. Dr. Hale stepped inside wearing a light blue coat, the morning sunlight spilling behind him. He smiled in that steady, reassuring way she remembered. "You made it through perfectly," he said. "The procedure was successful. Your body is going to need time, but you are going to be all right." Grace tried to speak, but her voice cracked. It hurts." "I know," he said gently. "The pain will fade soon. You did incredibly well." His tone was professional, yet something about the way he said her name felt personal, as if he had been waiting for her to wake up. He adjusted her blanket and checked the monitor himself, though a nurse could have done it. His hands were steady, his movements careful, never hurried. When he stepped back, Grace noticed a faint exhaustion beneath his calm. There was a kindness there, but also something heavier, as if he carried secrets far beyond this room. Later that evening, when the hallway lights dimmed and the hospital quieted to its midnight hum, Grace opened her eyes again. Through the glass wall of her recovery room, she saw Dr. Hale standing at the nurse's station, reviewing charts under a desk lamp. For a fleeting moment, he looked less like a doctor and more like a man lost in thought. She wondered why someone like him, young, brilliant, and confident, chose a life surrounded by other people's pain. She did not know that his name carried another weight entirely, one she was about to discover soon. But for now, as the machines hummed and her heartbeat steadied, Grace drifted back into sleep with his last words echoing softly in her mind. "You are safe now." "No." Grace Miller woke to a soft morning light spilling through the blinds. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor pulsed beside her, almost like a quiet heartbeat of the hospital itself. She had survived the surgery. Her body was sore, her throat still raw, but her mind was clear enough now to remember where she was. A nurse entered with a gentle smile. "How are we feeling today?" Grace managed a weak smile. "Better. Just tired." "That is normal. Your body went through a lot. Try to rest." The nurse adjusted the blanket and slipped out, leaving the faint scent of hand sanitizer in the air. For a moment, Grace stared at the ceiling tiles, each one a pale square that looked exactly like the next. She had spent her whole life trying to stay invisible, to never cause trouble or draw attention. Even illness had felt like a kind of shame, something to hide. That was how she had lived for years, quietly enduring the sharp cramps that left her bent over her desk at work, telling coworkers she just had a headache. Before the surgery, she had almost canceled twice. She had no family nearby, no one to drive her home afterward, no one waiting to hold her hand. Her mother had passed away years earlier after a long battle with cervical cancer. Grace still remembered the way hospital corridors smelled of bleach and fear. Every step into this building had felt like stepping back into that memory. Later that afternoon, Dr. Adrian Hale returned. He carried her chart under one arm, his tone calm and reassuring as always. "You are recovering well," he said. "Your vitals are steady. We will start you on light movement tomorrow." Grace nodded, keeping her eyes down. "Thank you, doctor." He studied her for a second longer. "Are you in pain?" "Only a little. It comes and goes." "That is expected," he said. "If you need anything, you press that button, all right?" His professionalism was perfect, almost too perfect. Yet when he looked at her, there was a flicker of something else concerned that felt personal, not just medical. Grace turned her face toward the window, pretending to watch the city skyline beyond. She could not let herself imagine things that were not there. When he left, she picked up the small notebook from her bedside table. It was the same one she had brought with her to the hospital, a habit she had learned to calm her mind. She opened to a blank page and began to write slowly. "Day 1 after surgery. I am scared, but alive. The doctor said I did well. Maybe he was just being kind. Maybe I actually did." Her handwriting wobbled from weakness, but the words steadied her. Writing had always been her way of surviving silence. Hours passed. The hospital grew quieter as visiting hours ended. Grace watched the clock hands move, minute by minute. Every sound, the roll of a cart, the squeak of shoes in the hallway, felt amplified. For the first time, she wondered who Dr. Hale really was. His calmness did not seem rehearsed like most people in power. His eyes carried something heavier, like a man used to standing between life and loss. That night, she overheard 2 nurses talking near the door. "Did you know he turned down a research position at Hale Biotech?" one whispered. "The company his father owns?" "Yeah. Apparently he does not care about the money. He just wants to work here, with patients." Grace blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. Hale Biotech? The same name on most of the hospital's machines and medicine labels? It could not be a coincidence. She turned the name over in her mind again and again. Dr. Adrian Hale, heir to Hale Biotech. She felt an odd twist in her stomach, not fear exactly, but disbelief. Why would a millionaire choose to work long shifts in an ordinary hospital ward instead of running a company? Why would he talk to her like an equal when he could have walked away from this entire life? When the lights dimmed to night mode, Grace closed her eyes, but sleep refused to come. The monitors hummed softly, a mechanical lullaby. She remembered the way his voice had sounded before the surgery. "You are safe now." For years, she had never believed those words. Safe had never been something real to her. But lying here, alone in the quiet glow of the machines, she began to wonder if maybe this time they were true. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, laying warm stripes across the pale hospital sheets. Grace Miller blinked awake, her body still heavy but her mind sharper than the day before. The pain was dull now, manageable, and the nausea had eased. A nurse entered with a soft knock, setting a tray on the side table, oatmeal, apple juice, and something that looked like scrambled eggs. "Good morning, Miss Miller. Dr. Hale will be making his rounds shortly," the nurse said kindly before leaving. Grace stared at the tray. Her appetite was gone, but she forced herself to take a few slow bites. Eating felt like reclaiming a small piece of normal life. She thought about what she had overheard the night before, the name Hale Biotech echoing in her mind. If it was true, then the quiet young doctor who had spoken so gently to her was part of a family that practically built this hospital. It was a strange thought, one that made her chest tighten. The door opened softly. Dr. Adrian Hale stepped in, carrying his tablet. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had not slept much. "Good morning, Grace," he said, his tone calm and deliberate. "How are you feeling today?" "A little sore," she admitted, sitting up slowly. "But better. I can move without feeling like I will break apart." "That is progress," he said, checking her foreline and noting her blood pressure. "You are healing faster than most patients I have seen after this procedure." Grace hesitated. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" His lips curved slightly. "It is very good. You are strong." He moved to the end of the bed, flipping through the pages on his tablet. Then he looked at the sketchbook on her nightstand. "You draw?" Grace followed his gaze, embarrassed. "Sometimes. It helps me keep calm." "May I?" he asked gently. She nodded. He picked it up, flipping through a few pages of delicate pencil sketches. Wildflowers, coffee cups, people in subway cars. "You have an eye for small things," he said softly. "You notice details most people miss." Grace shrugged. "Maybe because the small things are all I can handle." "All?" He looked at her for a long moment, then set the sketchbook back exactly where it had been. "You should not underestimate that. Healing often begins with small things." When he left, Grace felt something shift inside her, a quiet warmth, the kind that sneaks in without warning. She opened her notebook again and began to write. Day 2. Dr. Hale said I am strong. I do not feel strong. But maybe he sees something I cannot. Later that afternoon, the nurse helped her take her first steps down the hallway. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Each step made her abdomen ache, but she pushed through, counting her breaths. When she turned the corner, she saw Dr. Hale standing at the nurse's station, listening to a resident report. He noticed her instantly. "You are up already," he said, walking toward her with a look of approval. "That is excellent. You are healing beautifully." "Oh, I wanted to see if I could," she said, gripping the walker. "It feels strange, but good." He smiled. "Strange is part of recovery. Do not rush it." A janitor passed, mopping the floor, and Grace moved aside. She noticed how Dr. Hale thanked the man by name. It surprised her. Most doctors she had met before barely noticed the staff around them. There was something disarming about that simple act of kindness. It made him feel more human than any title could. That evening, Grace sat by the window watching the city lights blink on. She could see reflections of other rooms, other patients, other lives. On her tray was a small envelope. Inside was a note written in elegant handwriting. "Join us for afternoon art therapy in the East Wing, room 14, A.H." Her heart skipped. She had heard about the hospital's art sessions for patients, but she never imagined he would invite her personally. The next day she went, nervous but curious. The room smelled faintly of paint and lavender. There were canvases, brushes, and a few patients sketching quietly. Dr. Hale appeared in casual clothes, no lab coat, no clipboard. He simply nodded at her, offering a small smile. "You made it." She took a seat near the window. The afternoon light poured in, soft and golden. Her hands trembled as she began to draw. When she finished, he walked over. It was a sketch of a hand holding a beam of sunlight. "That is beautiful," he said. Grace looked down, embarrassed. "It is just lines." "Maybe," he said, "but sometimes lines tell the truth better than words." Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten again. She looked at him, really looked, and realized for the first time that beneath his calm exterior, he seemed lonely too. As she packed her pencils, she caught his reflection in the window. He was smiling faintly, but his eyes looked tired. She wondered what secrets a man like that could be hiding. She did not know it yet, but that quiet afternoon in room 14 would be the beginning of a bond that neither of them could have expected one born. Not from perfection, but from pain, and from the fragile hope of healing together. Over the next week, the hospital became a world of soft footsteps and quiet voices. Grace Miller grew stronger each day, taking short walks in the corridor and attending every art therapy session she could. The pain was still there, but it had changed less sharp, more like an echo fading with time. Every day Dr. Adrian Hale would appear, always calm, always composed, asking how she felt, checking her progress, encouraging her to keep drawing. One afternoon, as the rain tapped gently against the tall windows, he found her sitting in the art room again. She was sketching a garden she remembered from her childhood, a place she had not seen since her mother's funeral. Her lines were slow, thoughtful, like she was rebuilding something she once lost. "That is beautiful," Adrian said, standing behind her. "Where is it?" Grace looked up. "It was my mother's garden, back in Connecticut." She loved roses. I used to sit on the steps and draw while she worked. He smiled softly. It looks peaceful. It was, Grace said, her voice barely a whisper. Before she got sick. He nodded, understanding. There was no need for more words. For a long moment, they both watched the rain blur the city outside, two strangers sharing the silence of remembrance. Later, as they walked back toward her room, Adrian said quietly, "You have made amazing progress, Grace. I think you might be ready to go home soon." Her heart jumped. "Already?" "Yes," he said. "Your body is healing well. You will still need to rest, but I believe you can recover better in your own space." Grace hesitated. The idea of leaving filled her with both relief and sadness. She had built a strange kind of safety here, a rhythm of soft mornings and kind faces. Most of all, she had grown used to seeing him every day. That night, she sat on her bed, unable to sleep. She turned on the small bedside lamp and opened her sketchbook again. On one page, she drew a man's silhouette standing in the doorway of a bright room, sunlight behind him. Beneath it, she wrote 3 words. "He helped me breathe." When she woke the next morning, her discharge papers were already on the table. A nurse came in with a warm smile. "Dr. Hale will review these with you before you leave." Grace dressed slowly, folded her notebook, and waited. Her pulse raced when the door opened. Adrian entered with a gentle smile, carrying her chart. "So, this is goodbye for now," he said. "Thank you, Dr. Hale," she said softly. "For everything." He handed her the papers and paused. "Grace, before you go, there is something I should tell you. I wanted to wait until you were stronger." Her breath caught. He looked almost uncertain for the first time since she met him. "You probably heard my last name mentioned around here. Hale Biotech belongs to my family. I am part of that world, but I chose to work here because I wanted to remember what medicine is really for." Grace blinked, unable to speak. "You mean, you are—" He nodded gently. "Yes, but it does not change what you accomplished. You did this, not me." For a moment, she just stared at him, her heart pounding. All the quiet moments, his late-night visits, his careful attention, they suddenly felt different. "Why would you even bother with someone like me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian's expression softened. "Because healing does not care about who has money or who does not. It only listens to who refuses to give up." Grace's eyes filled with tears she did not expect. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded, holding his gaze for one last unspoken moment. Then she turned and walked out of the hospital into the pale morning light, carrying her sketchbook close to her heart. She did not know it yet, but this was only the beginning of what bound them together, the moment when truth met gratitude, and healing began to mean something more. Days passed, and the headlines began to fade, but the ache in Grace Miller's chest did not. She tried to return to her normal life, working part-time at the small bookstore on 8th Avenue. Yet everything felt different. Every time the bell above the door rang, her heart jumped, half expecting to see him walk in. But he never did. One evening, the store was empty, except for the hum of soft jazz playing through the speakers. Grace wiped the counter, her movements slow, distracted. Outside, the rain poured again, streaking the glass in silver lines. She remembered that same sound against the hospital window the day he had told her she was strong. When she finally closed the shop, she walked home under her umbrella, the city glowing with wet lights. At a red light, she saw a newspaper stand. Adrian's face was still on the cover of a business magazine, the headline reading, "From Heir to Healer, Adrian Hale steps away from fortune." Her throat tightened. She knew the world would move on, but part of her could not. He had given up everything, and she had not even said goodbye. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian sat alone in his apartment, overlooking the East River. The silence was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the clock. On his desk lay the letter of resignation, a symbol of everything he had walked away from. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted, yet somehow relieved. He missed the hospital, the steady rhythm of work, the people who trusted him, the quiet strength of one particular patient who refused to quit. Grace's face lingered in his mind, her soft voice, her sketches, her courage. That night, as the rain fell harder, Adrian made a decision. He would not let what happened end in silence. Healing, he realized, was not only about medicine, it was about standing up for what was right, even when it hurt. The next morning, he drafted a plan, a new foundation that would provide affordable care for women across the country. And he knew exactly what to call it: the Grace Initiative. The weeks that followed brought quiet change. Grace Miller's recovery had gone well, but her life still felt unfinished, as if a chapter had ended before it was meant to. She spent her evenings writing in her small notebook, the one she had carried since her hospital days. Most of the pages were now filled with words she would never send: letters to Dr. Adrian Hale. Letters of gratitude, anger, and something softer she dared not name. One morning, as she opened her mailbox, an envelope caught her eye. It was white, stamped with a familiar name, embossed in silver: the Grace Initiative Foundation. Her heart skipped a beat. Inside was an invitation to an opening ceremony, an event dedicated to expanding affordable women's health care across the country. Her eyes blurred when she reached the last line: "You once reminded me that healing starts with courage. I hope you will come." It was signed simply, Adrian. Grace stood frozen on the sidewalk, the letter trembling in her hands. For a moment, she wanted to tear it apart, afraid of reopening old wounds. But then she remembered his words in the hospital: "You are strong." Maybe this was the time to prove it. A week later, she stood before a sleek glass building in downtown Manhattan. Banners fluttered with the foundation's logo, a golden outline of a blooming flower. Cameras flashed as reporters gathered near the entrance. But this time, she did not feel small. She stepped forward, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, and walked inside. The lobby buzzed with quiet anticipation. Grace scanned the crowd until she saw him near the stage, speaking with a group of journalists. Adrian looked almost the same, though thinner, a little older around the eyes. When their gazes met, he paused mid-sentence. The noise around them faded. She hesitated, then walked closer. "You named it after me?" she asked softly. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "It was never really about me. It was about what you reminded me of. Real medicine heals people, not balance sheets." Grace's throat tightened. "You did not have to give up everything." "I did," he said gently. "Otherwise, I would never have understood what my work truly meant." "Lou?" The ceremony began. Adrian stepped to the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the audience. "This foundation is built on compassion and equality. Every woman deserves the right to care, no matter her income or her name." The crowd applauded. Grace felt tears rise, pride and gratitude mixing in her chest. For the first time in a long while, she felt something inside her mend. After the speech, Adrian found her near a display wall, lined with sketches from the art therapy program. Her drawings were among them. "I kept them," he said quietly. "They reminded me why I stayed in medicine." Grace traced the edge of one frame with her fingertips. "You turned pain into something good," she whispered. He shook his head. "We did." The air between them held a new kind of stillness, not awkward, but full of meaning. For the first time, they stood as equals, two people who had faced their own storms and chosen to rise again. That night, as the city lights shimmered through the tall glass windows, Grace realized that justice was not always about punishment. Sometimes it was about redemption, choosing to heal not only yourself but the world around you. A few months passed, and the air in New York turned crisp and cool. The Grace Initiative Foundation had already opened 2 new clinics in the state, and Grace Miller found herself part of the team working as a writer and outreach coordinator. She spent her days collecting stories from patients, women who had once been too afraid to ask for help but now had a place to go. Every story she wrote felt like another thread sewn into something whole, something hopeful. Adrian Hale visited the clinics often, though he never acted like a celebrity. He wore simple shirts, carried boxes, spoke with patients, and listened more than he talked. Watching him, Grace felt a quiet admiration she could no longer hide from herself. One late afternoon, she sat at her desk in the foundation's small office. The sun was setting, painting the skyline in amber and gold. On her screen glowed the title of her latest piece, "Bodies That Heal." It was a feature about the women whose lives had changed because of the foundation. Yet, as she typed, she realized the story was also about herself. Adrian knocked on the open door. "Working late again?" he asked, his tone soft. Grace smiled. "Old habits. I want to finish this piece before tomorrow." He stepped closer, looking at the text on her screen. You are writing about them. I am writing about all of us, she said quietly, about how pain can be turned into purpose. He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. You know, when I resigned, I thought I had lost everything. But seeing this place, seeing you here, I think I finally found what I was meant to do. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of the city outside, the hum of traffic, the distant horn of a ferry seemed to fade. Grace finally looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. You did not have to name it after me. He smiled faintly. I did not name it after you. I named it after what you represent: courage, and the belief that healing belongs to everyone. She felt her throat tighten, emotion rising before she could stop it. You have given so many people hope, Adrian. He shook his head gently. We have. The office lights dimmed as the evening deepened. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out her old sketchbook, now slightly worn at the edges. You left this in the hospital, he said. I kept it. I thought you might want it back. Grace took it carefully, her fingers brushing his for a brief second that sent warmth rushing up her arm. You remembered. Of course, he said. You once drew light in a hand. I never forgot that. Oh. She opened the book and found a new page she had not written. Inside, he had drawn something, a delicate outline of a blooming flower, the same symbol as the foundation's logo. Beneath it were his words. Healing is not about who saves whom. It is about the moments when two people choose not to give up. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked up and whispered, You really believe that, do you? I do, he said. And I think you do too. Oh. As night fell over the city, the two of them stood by the window, the reflection of their faces blending with the lights outside. It was not the end of their story, but the quiet beginning of something deeper, two hearts stitched together by the same thread of grace, learning that hope, once found, should never be hidden again. Winter arrived quietly that year. Snow fell over the city in slow, graceful waves, softening the noise of New York into a calm hush. The Grace Initiative Foundation was thriving, and Grace Miller's article, Bodies That Heal, had gone viral online. Messages poured in from women across the country, some thanking her for sharing their stories, others saying it gave them courage to seek help for the first time. One evening, the foundation hosted a small celebration at the rooftop garden of the main clinic. Strings of golden lights shimmered against the falling snow. Staff, patients, and volunteers gathered with cups of cocoa in their hands, laughter floating through the cold air. Grace stood by the railing, her cheeks pink from the wind, watching the city glitter below. Behind her, a familiar voice said, It is beautiful up here. Is it not? She turned and found Adrian Hale standing there, wrapped in a dark wool coat, snowflakes melting on his hair. His eyes held that same calm she had first seen in the operating room, but now there was something new. Peace. It is, Grace said softly. You did all this, Adrian. You built something that will last. He shook his head with a quiet smile. No, Grace, we built this. Every drawing, every word, every act of kindness. You reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. They stood side by side, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. The crowd behind them began to count down to the lighting of the foundation's new sign. When the clock struck 8, the sign illuminated in gold letters. The Grace Initiative. Healing with Humanity. Applause filled the air. Grace felt tears sting her eyes. She looked up at the glowing words and whispered, It is perfect. Adrian turned to her, his voice low. You once told me you did not feel strong, but you were wrong. Strength is not about never falling. It is about rising again, even when it hurts. She met his gaze, her breath visible in the cold air. And you taught me that healing is not about being fixed. It is about being seen. He smiled gently, reaching into his pocket. There is one more thing I kept. He handed her a small folded paper. When she opened it, she saw the drawing she had made long ago, a hand holding sunlight. Below it, in his handwriting, were the words, You are safe now. The words made her heart swell. Around them, laughter and music filled the night. But for a moment it felt like the world had gone still. Grace slipped her hand into his, her fingers fitting perfectly against his glove. You know, she whispered, for a man who once ran from his family's fortune, you have given something richer than money. And for a woman who once thought she was broken, he replied, you have shown what real courage looks like. Snowflakes drifted between them, melting into warmth. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she leaned into him, the noise of the world fading into something softer, like peace, like love, like home. As the camera of the night panned wide across the rooftop, the sign continued to glow behind them, a symbol of everything they had built together. True healing, Grace thought, was not the absence of pain, but the presence of someone who refused to walk away. And in that moment, under the quiet fall of snow, she finally knew she was home.